Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Concordia Prime was the size of a small moon, covered in gleaming towers and spinning rings. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and also the most terrifying. "Captain, we're getting signals from the station," said Lieutenant Kate Murphy from her console. "They're telling us to turn around and go home." Jake smiled. "Tell them we're not going anywhere." Dr. Lisa Carter walked up beside him, her tablet, showing data about the alien species they were about to meet. "Are you sure about this, Jake? We're about to make contact with 12 different alien races. They've been ruling this galaxy for 10,000 years. "That's exactly why we need to be here," Jake said. "Earth has been ignored long enough. The human fleet had traveled for months to reach this place. 5 ships, carrying the best and brightest that Earth had to offer. They had developed faster-than-light travel on their own, without any help from the aliens who had been watching them for decades. The Galactic Council had placed Earth under quarantine 50 years ago. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable. They were afraid of what might happen if humans joined the galactic community. So they put up barriers around the solar system and tried to pretend Earth didn't exist. But humans had broken through those barriers. They had built ships that could travel between the stars. And now they were here, demanding their place at the table. "Incoming transmission from the station," Kate announced. The main screen changed to show a tall, crystal-like being. Its body was made of what looked like living glass, and when it spoke, musical tones filled the air. "I am Resonance of Ancient Wisdom, Prime Speaker of the Galactic Council," the being said. "You humans are not welcome here. Return to your world immediately." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Defiance. We're here to request membership in the Galactic Council." The crystal being's form flickered with what might have been laughter. "Membership? You primitive creatures? The Council has already decided. Your species is too dangerous to join civilized society." "That's not your choice to make," Jake said, firmly. "We're citizens of this galaxy too. We have the right to be here." Other alien faces appeared on smaller screens around the bridge. Lisa recognized some of them from her studies. There were the Zephyrians made of living crystal like the Prime Speaker. The Nebulans looked like clouds of glowing gas with faces that constantly shifted. The hive-mind Terminus resembled giant insects with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. Each species looked at the humans with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. They whispered among themselves in languages that the translation systems could barely handle. "Your reputation precedes you," said a Nebulan representative, its voice like wind through caves. "We have studied your history, wars, violence, destruction. You turn everything you touch into conflict." "We also turn conflict into progress," Jake replied. "We've survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. We've reached for the stars when everyone said it was impossible." Chief Engineer Ben Taylor was monitoring the conversation from his station below. He had been studying the alien technology since they arrived in the system. What he saw surprised him. For all their advanced knowledge, the aliens seemed to have stopped innovating centuries ago. Their technology was perfect, but it was also static. "Captain," Ben called out quietly, "their defensive systems have some interesting weaknesses. Their sensors are configured for known threats only." Jake nodded slightly. The humans had noticed this too. The Galactic Council was so used to being the most advanced civilization that they had become complacent. "We offer you one final chance," Resonance of Ancient Wisdom announced. "Leave now, and we will allow you to return to Earth unharmed. Refuse, and we will be forced to escort you out of Council space." "And if we refuse your escort?" Jake asked. The crystal being's form brightened, dangerously. "Then you will face the consequences of defying the established order." Lisa had been quietly scanning the aliens during the conversation. What she found in the station's databases made her blood run cold. Hidden deep in the archives were references to something called the Devourers. The records were fragmented, but they spoke of creatures that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The strange thing was, the record stopped abruptly about 1,000 years ago. It was as if the council had deliberately tried to forget about whatever the devourers were. "Captain," Lisa whispered, "I'm finding some disturbing information in their databases. There's something they're not telling us." Before Jake could respond, Ambassador Helen Price's voice came over the comm system from her ship. "Jake, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from some of the council ships. I think they're preparing to surround us." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Kate was ready at the weapons console. Ben had his finger on the engine controls. Lisa was still analyzing alien data. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but none of them looked afraid. "Prime Speaker," Jake said calmly, "we came here in peace. We're offering to share our knowledge and our strength with the galactic community. But we won't be bullied and we won't be ignored." "Your strength?" The Zephyrian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You have 5 small ships against the entire galactic fleet. What could you possibly do?" Jake smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when facing impossible odds during his military career on Earth. "Would you like to find out?" The alien representatives began talking rapidly among themselves. They had expected the humans to back down when faced with superior numbers. Most species would have apologized and retreated, but humans were different. "We are prepared to give you a demonstration of human determination," Jake announced. "But I'd prefer to do this peacefully. Grant us membership in the council, and we can work together to solve problems that benefit everyone." The Prime Speaker's crystalline form dimmed as he consulted with the other council members. The humans waited patiently. They had come too far to turn back now. Finally, resonance of ancient wisdom returned to the screen. "The council will hear your request. But know this, humans. If you prove to be the threat we believe you are, we will take action to protect the galaxy from your influence." Jake nodded respectfully. "That's all we ask for. The chance to prove what humanity can contribute to the galactic community." As the transmission ended, Lisa continued her analysis of the alien databases. The more she read about the devourers, the more worried she became. The council was hiding something big, something that might threaten all life in the galaxy, and somehow she suspected that humanity's arrival was going to force that secret into the open. The council chambers were enormous, with representatives from 12 different species arranged in a perfect circle. Each delegation sat in environments suited to their biology. The nebulans floated in containment fields filled with their native gases. The terminus hive mind clustered together in their insect-like formations. The Zephyrians stood tall and still, their crystal bodies catching and reflecting light from every angle. Jake Morrison sat at the simple metal table that had been provided for the human delegation. Beside him, Ambassador Helen Price reviewed her notes one final time. Dr. Lisa Carter had her tablet ready, filled with information about human achievements and capabilities. Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom began the session with a tone that sounded like distant bells. "The humans have requested membership in the Galactic Council. Before we consider this request, they must prove they are worthy of joining our civilized community." A Nebulan representative spoke next, its voice like rushing wind. "We have reviewed human history. Your species has fought over 300 major wars in the last 1,000 years alone. You have weapons capable of destroying your own planet. How can we trust such a violent species?" Helen stood up gracefully. "Every species has a history of conflict. The difference is that we learned from our mistakes. Our wars taught us the value of peace. Our weapons taught us the importance of restraint." "Words are easy," clicked a Terminus representative, its multiple eyes focusing on the humans. "The hive mind has seen many species make promises they cannot keep. What proof do you offer?" Jake rose from his seat. "Actions speak louder than words. We're prepared to demonstrate our capabilities and our intentions." The Prime Speaker's crystal form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Very well. Your first test will be to solve a problem that has troubled this station for 300 years. Our main power distribution system has inefficiencies that our best engineers cannot fix." Chief Engineer Ben Taylor had been waiting for this moment. He stepped forward with confidence. "I'd like to examine the system if you'll permit it." Within an hour, Ben was deep in the mechanical sections of Concordia Prime, surrounded by alien technology that hummed and pulsed with unknown energy. The Council's engineers watched him work, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The power system was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly complex. The aliens had built layer upon layer of improvements over thousands of years, creating a maze of interconnected systems that nobody fully understood anymore. Ben pulled out his simple human tools and began tracing power flows through the massive conduits. "Your problem isn't the technology," he said to the watching engineers. "It's that you've forgotten the basics." He began disconnecting unnecessary components, simplifying circuits that had become overcomplicated. The alien engineers protested that such changes would cause system failures, but Ben continued working. "Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one," he explained as he rerouted power through more direct pathways. When he finished, the station's power efficiency had improved by 15%. The alien engineers stared at their readouts in disbelief. Some of the improvements were so obvious that they wondered how they had missed them. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, the political discussions continued. A representative from the crystalline Voltari species spoke up. "Even if these humans can solve technical problems, how do we know they won't use their skills against us? They could easily sabotage our systems." Jake exchanged a look with Commander Alex Rodriguez, who had been sitting quietly in the observer section. Alex nodded and stood up. "If you're worried about our military capabilities," Alex said calmly, "perhaps we should address that concern directly." Before anyone could respond, Alex activated a small device he had been carrying. Suddenly, all the lights in the council chambers flickered and went out. Emergency systems kicked in, but they too failed within seconds. The alien representatives began to panic. The nebulans started dispersing in their containment fields. The Terminus hive mind clicked rapidly in their own language. The Zephyrian's crystal forms blazed with alarm. Then, just as suddenly, all systems came back online. The lights returned, the environmental controls resumed their normal operation, and the security system showed green across the board. "How did you do that?" demanded the prime speaker, his musical tone sharp with shock. Alex smiled. "We studied your defensive systems during our approach. They're very impressive, but they're designed to handle known threats. We simply introduced an unknown variable." "You disabled our entire security grid," protested a Voltari representative. "We disabled it and then restored it," Helen corrected gently. "If we wanted to harm you, we wouldn't have brought it back online. This was a demonstration of capability, not a threat." The council members began talking among themselves in their various languages. The humans could hear fragments of the conversations. Through their translation devices, words like impossible, dangerous, and unprecedented were repeated frequently. Dr. Lisa Carter chose this moment to reveal her discovery. "We've been analyzing your historical databases during our visit. We found references to something called the Devourers. The records are incomplete, but they suggest a threat that disappeared about 1,000 years ago." The reaction was immediate. Several council representatives stopped talking entirely. Others began communicating through private channels. The prime speaker's crystal form dimmed noticeably. "Those records are classified," he said finally. "They are not relevant to your membership application." "With respect, prime speaker, I think they are," Lisa continued. "The pattern matches certain anomalies we detected on our journey here. Energy signatures that don't correspond to any known stellar phenomena." Now the council chamber fell completely silent. The humans could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. A Nebulan elder who had remained quiet throughout the proceedings finally spoke. "The young human speaks of things that should not be spoken of. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share." Jake stood up again. "Dangerous knowledge is exactly the kind that should be shared. If there's a threat out there, hiding from it won't make it go away." "The humans are correct," said an unexpected voice. One of the Terminus representatives, smaller than the others, stepped forward from its hive cluster. "This one remembers the old stories, the hunger that devours stars. If it returns, we will need every advantage we can find." The prime speaker's form blazed with anger. "The past is the past. We have built a civilization based on peace and cooperation. We will not be dragged back into the darkness by paranoid fears. But Jake could see that not all the council members agreed. Some were looking at the humans with new respect, recognizing that they had identified a problem that the council had been trying to ignore. Ben returned from his work on the power systems, unaware of the political drama that had been unfolding. "The repairs are complete," he announced. "Your station should run more efficiently now. I've also taken the liberty of installing some simple monitoring systems that will alert you to similar problems in the future." The gesture was small, but it carried great weight. The humans had demonstrated their ability to improve council technology, disable council defenses, and uncover council secrets. Yet they had used each capability not to threaten or harm, but to help and inform. Ambassador Helen Price sensed the mood in the chamber. "We didn't come here to conquer or control," she said softly. "We came here to contribute. Earth has faced many challenges, and we've learned that the best way to survive is to work together." The prime speaker looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. Some were still suspicious of the humans, but others were nodding, in agreement. The demonstration had been more effective than any speech could have been. "The council will deliberate on your request," he announced finally. "You will be given temporary quarters while we reach our decision." As the humans were escorted from the chamber, Lisa noticed something troubling. Several of the council representatives were having heated private discussions, and she caught fragments of words that made her worry. The phrases "human problem" and "permanent solution" kept appearing in the translations. It seemed that while some council members were impressed by humanity's demonstration, others were more convinced than ever that humans were too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society. The real question was which group would win the coming debate. The celebration in the human quarters was brief. After 3 days of deliberation, the Galactic Council had granted Earth provisional membership. It wasn't everything they had hoped for, but it was a beginning. Jake Morrison raised his glass of synthetic alcohol to toast their success. "To humanity's first step into the galactic community," he said. His crew cheered, but the sound was interrupted by an urgent alarm that echoed throughout the station. Emergency lights began flashing red, and automated voices started broadcasting warnings in 12 different languages. Dr. Lisa Carter grabbed her tablet and began accessing the station's sensor networks. What she saw made her blood freeze. "Jake, you need to see this." The main display in their quarters showed a view of deep space beyond the galaxy's rim. Massive. Shapes were moving through the darkness so large they blotted out entire star fields. The objects pulsed with a sickly purple light that seemed to hurt the eyes just to look at. "What are those?" asked Commander Alex Rodriguez. Before anyone could answer, Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom's voice filled the station. "All council members report to emergency session immediately. This is not a drill." The humans were not officially invited, but Jake decided they were going anyway. They had just become council members, even if only provisionally. They had a right to know what was happening. The council chamber was in chaos when they arrived. Representatives from all 12 species were talking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of sound that the translation systems could barely handle. Fear was evident in every gesture, every tone, every flicker of light from the crystalline species. "Order! Order!" The prime speaker's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "The situation is clear. Long-range sensors have detected multiple large objects approaching from the galactic void. Analysis confirms our worst fears." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the approaching shapes in detail. They were enormous, easily the size of small moons, and they moved with a purpose that was unmistakably hostile. "The Devourers have returned," whispered a Nebulan elder. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the humans, who didn't fully understand what they were seeing, could feel the terror radiating from the alien representatives. Lisa stepped forward. "What exactly are the Devourers?" Several council members turned to stare at her as if she had spoken blasphemy. The prime speaker's crystalline form dimmed to almost black. "They are the end of everything," he said quietly. "Creatures that consume not just matter, but the very essence of life itself. They leave behind only empty space, devoid of any possibility of life ever existing again." An ancient Voltari representative, so old his metallic skin had turned green, with age began to speak in a voice like grinding gears. This one was young when they last came. We watched them consume the builders, a species that had existed for 50,000 years, gone in a matter of days, as if they had never been. How did you survive? Jake asked. The old Voltari's eyes dimmed with shame. We fed them our enemies. 3 entire species were sacrificed while we ran and hid. The Kalari, the Endless, and the First Children, all given to the hunger so that we might live. The humans exchanged shocked glances. The Galactic Council, these supposedly civilized aliens, had committed genocide to save themselves. It was the only way, the Prime Speaker said defensively. The Devourers cannot be fought with conventional weapons. They exist partially in another dimension, making them nearly impossible to target. They consume life force directly, leaving nothing behind but dust and darkness. Alex studied the tactical displays. How fast do they move? At their current speed, they will reach the Outer Rim colonies within 6 standard days, reported a Terminus technician. The core worlds have perhaps 30 days before the first contact. Then we need to evacuate the Rim worlds immediately, Jake said. Evacuate to where? Asked a Nebulan representative. The Devourers follow life force signatures. They will hunt down every ship, every colony, every world, until nothing remains. The chamber fell silent again. The humans could see despair in every alien face. These beings had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but they had no answer for the approaching threat. What about Earth? Helen asked quietly. Will they attack our world too? The Prime Speaker turned his attention to her. Human life force burns very brightly. Your emotional intensity makes you particularly attractive to them. If anything, Earth will be among their priority targets. Lisa was studying the sensor data on her tablet. Something about the Devourer ships bothered her. Their energy signatures were strange, showing patterns that didn't match normal matter. They're not entirely in our dimension, she said suddenly. That's why conventional weapons don't work, but that might also be their weakness. Explain, demanded Alex. If they exist partially in another dimension, then they're not bound by the same physical laws we are. But that also means they might be vulnerable to attacks that normal matter couldn't survive. A Terminus scientist clicked its mandibles in what might have been agreement. The theory has merit. But what weapon could affect beings that exist beyond normal space? Ben had been quietly studying the station's defensive systems. What about a dimensional collapse? If we could force them fully into our dimension, they might become vulnerable to conventional weapons. The alien scientist began calculating rapidly. The mathematics were incredibly complex, but the basic theory was sound. If they could find a way to anchor the Devourers in normal space, they might be able to fight them. The power requirements would be enormous, said a Zephyrian engineer. We would need to sacrifice entire star systems to generate enough energy. Not necessarily, Ben said. What if we used their own energy against them? They're generating massive amounts of dimensional distortion just by existing. We might be able to redirect that energy. Before anyone could respond, new alarms began sounding. The long-range sensors were detecting something even more disturbing. First contact confirmed, announced a terrified Nebulan observer. The rim world of Sanctuary 7 has gone silent. All life signs have vanished. The holographic display changed to show what remained of the colony. Where once there had been a thriving world with millions of inhabitants, now there was only bare rock floating in space. The atmosphere was gone, the oceans were gone, and even the bacteria in the soil had been consumed. Estimated time for complete planetary consumption was 14 minutes, the observer continued. The Devourer's efficiency has improved since their last appearance. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. 14 minutes to consume an entire world. At that rate, they could devour the entire galaxy in a matter of months. We need to act now, he said firmly. Whatever we're going to do, we can't wait for them to get closer. What can we possibly do? Asked the Prime Speaker. We are 12 species, but they are an endless hunger. They have consumed thousands of civilizations across multiple galaxies. Jake looked around the chamber at the frightened alien faces. Then he looked at his own crew. seeing the determination in their eyes that made humans unique. "We do what humans always do when faced with impossible odds," he said quietly. "We find a way to win." Lisa was still studying the sensor data when she made a disturbing discovery. "Jake, I'm seeing something in these energy patterns. The Devourers aren't just randomly consuming worlds. They're following a specific path." "What kind of path?" She highlighted the trajectory on the display. The Devourer fleet was moving in a direct line toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their way. "They're heading straight for Concordia Prime," she announced. "This station is their primary target." The revelation sent another wave of panic through the council chamber. Not only were the Devourers back, but they were coming directly for the seat of galactic government. The ancient enemy had returned, and this time, they knew exactly where to find their prey. The war room aboard Concordia Prime had become a place of desperate planning. Representatives from all council species worked alongside human military experts, trying to find some way to stop the approaching Devourers. Every conventional strategy had been tried before and failed. Colonel Ryan Brooks sat at the tactical display, studying battle reports from the Rim worlds. Each report told the same story: complete annihilation in minutes, with no survivors and no trace of what had once lived there. "The pattern is consistent," he said grimly. "The Devourers don't just kill living things. They consume the life force itself, leaving matter that has never been alive and can never support life again." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her biological analysis. "I've been studying the few sensor readings we have from the attacks. The Devourers seem to feed by connecting directly to living consciousness. They drain what we might call the soul, leaving only empty matter behind. Which explains why conventional weapons don't work," added Chief Engineer Ben Taylor. "You can't shoot something that exists primarily as living energy." The Galactic Council's military leaders had shared everything they knew about previous encounters. The records painted a grim picture. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia were reduced to cosmic dust in hours. Weapons that could crack planets had no effect on the shadow-like creatures that flowed across space like a dark tide. Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom stood at the head of the table, his crystal form dim with despair. "Our ancestors faced them with fleets numbering in the millions. The battle lasted 3 days. In the end, we saved ourselves only by fleeing while 3 allied species bought us time with their lives." Ambassador Helen Price spoke quietly. "What exactly happened to those sacrificed species?" "They volunteered to act as bait," said an old Nebulan elder. "They drew the Devourers away from our core worlds, giving us time to hide in the galactic void. We thought the creatures had moved on to other galaxies. We were wrong." Jake Morrison had been silent during most of the briefing, but now he stood up. "I want to understand something. When the Devourers consume a living being, do they gain anything from the process besides nutrition?" "They absorb the life essence," the Prime Speaker replied. "All knowledge, all memory, all emotion becomes part of their collective consciousness. It makes them stronger and more intelligent." "And what happens if they consume something that fights back?" The question surprised the alien representatives. Fighting back during the consumption process was considered impossible. Once the Devourers began draining life force, their victims typically fell into despair and accepted their fate. Lisa suddenly looked up from her tablet with excitement. "Jake, I think I understand what you're getting at. Every species the Devourers have encountered has the same response to being consumed: fear and surrender. But humans get angry," Jake finished. "We don't go quietly." Colonel Brooks pulled up psychological profiles of human soldiers. "Throughout our history, humans have shown a unique trait. When faced with certain death instead of despair, we often experience rage and defiance. We fight even when fighting is hopeless." "That's just foolish stubbornness," said a Terminus representative, clicking its mandibles dismissively. "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But what if that stubbornness could poison the Devourers?" Dr. Carter began running calculations on her tablet. If human consciousness actively resists during the consumption process, it might disrupt their feeding. Like trying to eat something that fights back from the inside. The idea was so radical that several alien representatives left their seats. The concept of using living beings as weapons violated every principle of civilized warfare. "You're talking about suicide attacks," protested a Zephyrian diplomat. "Deliberately sacrificing your people to potentially harm the enemy. It's barbaric." "It's human," Jake said simply, "and it might be the only advantage we have." Lieutenant Kate Murphy had been monitoring communications from the Rim worlds during the meeting. Now she stood up with a pale face. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the survivor pod that escaped Sanctuary 7. They want to speak with you specifically." The main display activated to show a human face. It was Captain Danny Clark, a trader who had been delivering supplies to the Rim colonies. His ship was heavily damaged and he looked like he had seen hell itself. "Captain Morrison," Danny said, his voice shaking. "I was there when they hit Sanctuary 7. I saw what they did to the colonists." "Tell us everything," Jake ordered. The creatures came out of nowhere, moving like liquid shadow. They surrounded the entire planet in minutes. But when they started feeding on the human colonists, something went wrong. The creatures that consumed humans started moving differently, like they were sick or confused. The alien representatives leaned forward with interest. This was the first report of devourers showing any kind of weakness. Danny continued, "I watched through my ship's sensors as the creatures that had consumed humans began attacking the others. It only lasted for a few minutes, but it was like they were fighting each other." Lisa's tablet began showing new calculations. If human consciousness creates internal conflict within the devourers, it might disrupt their entire collective mind. "How many humans were on Sanctuary 7? Asked Colonel Brooks. "About 50,000, Danny replied. The creatures that consumed them were acting erratically for almost an hour before they regained control. Ben looked up from his engineering calculations. If 50,000 humans could disrupt them for an hour, what could 1,000,000 humans do? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. The aliens stared at the humans with a mixture of awe and horror. They were discussing the deliberate sacrifice of millions of people as if it were a military strategy. "You can't be serious," said the Prime Speaker. "No civilized species would consider such a plan." "We're not talking about forcing anyone," Helen said firmly. "But if volunteers knew their sacrifice could save entire worlds, how many do you think would step forward?" Jake knew the answer to that question. He had served with humans in impossible situations before. When survival was at stake, humans would volunteer for missions with zero chance of return. "We need to test the theory first," he said. "I'll take a small ship and make contact with one of their scout vessels. If human consciousness really does disrupt their feeding process, we'll know soon enough." "That's suicide," protested Dr. Carter. "We can't lose you now." "We can't save the galaxy with theories," Jake replied. "Someone has to find out if this works." Before anyone could object further, new alarms began sounding throughout the station. The sensor operators reported multiple Devourer vessels had appeared at the edge of the system. "They're not moving toward us," announced a Terminus technician. "They appear to be studying us." The tactical display showed 3 massive shadow shapes hovering just outside the system's gravity well. They pulsed with that same sickly purple light, but they weren't advancing. "They're deciding which target to hit first," said Colonel Brooks grimly. "Trying to determine which worlds will provide the most life force." Jake looked around the war room at the assembled faces. Aliens who had ruled the galaxy for millennia were looking to humans for salvation. The irony wasn't lost on him. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it right," he said. "We'll need volunteers from every human settlement in the galaxy, and we'll need to coordinate the attacks to maximize the disruption." "You're talking about the extinction of your entire species," said a Nebulan elder quietly. Jake met the alien's gaze steadily. "We're talking about making sure every human death counts for something. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well take these monsters with us." Dr. Carter looked at her tablet one more time, double-checking her calculations. "The mathematics support the theory. If enough humans resist during consumption, we might be able to cause a cascade failure in their collective consciousness." "And if you're wrong?" asked the Prime Speaker. Jake smiled grimly. Then at least we'll die fighting instead of cowering in fear. The words struck home. The alien representatives realized that this was what made humans different. Every other species in the galaxy had faced the Devourers with terror and despair. Only humans faced them with defiant rage. It might be the difference between extinction and survival. The modified ship hung in space like a metal coffin, its hull covered with sensors and recording devices. Chief Pilot Danny Clark sat in the pilot's seat, checking his instruments one final time. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the biological systems that would record everything that happened during the consumption process. "Are you sure about this, Danny?" Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from Concordia Prime. Danny looked out at the Devourer scout ship approaching his position. It was smaller than the main vessels, only about the size of a city, but it pulsed with the same hungry purple light. "I've seen what these things do, Captain. If my death can help stop them, then it's worth it." The plan was simple but terrifying. Danny would allow himself to be consumed while the ship's computers recorded every detail of the process. If human consciousness really could disrupt the Devourers, they would see it happen in real time. Lisa watched her readings as the shadow creature approached. "Danny, your life force signature is off the charts. I've never seen readings like this from any species we've studied." "Must be all that human stubbornness," Danny replied with a weak smile. The Devourer scout enveloped his ship like a dark fog. Immediately, Danny felt something trying to connect with his mind. It was cold and vast, like falling into an ocean of ice. But instead of fear, he felt rage building inside him. "It's starting," he reported through gritted teeth. "I can feel it trying to drain my life force, but I'm fighting back." On Concordia Prime, the war room was silent as they watched the readings from Danny's ship. His life signs were dropping rapidly, but something else was happening too. The Devourer's energy patterns were becoming unstable. "The creature is showing signs of distress," reported a Terminus technician. "Its feeding process is being disrupted." Danny's voice came through the speakers, strained but defiant. "I can feel its thoughts. It's confused. It's used to fear and surrender. But all I can think about is how much I want to hurt this thing." The biological monitors showed Danny's life force fading, but they also showed the Devourer's energy signature fluctuating wildly. The creature was having trouble processing the violent resistance it was encountering. "It's working," Lisa said, with amazement. "The Devourer is actually being damaged by consuming him." Danny's final transmission was barely audible. "Tell everyone. Fight back. Make it hurt." The sensors showed his life force disappearing entirely, but the effect on the Devourer was dramatic. The creature's purple glow flickered and dimmed. It began moving erratically, as if drunk or poisoned. "The scout vessel is withdrawing," announced Alex Rodriguez from the tactical station. "It's heading back toward the main fleet, but its movement patterns are completely chaotic." Jake stood up slowly. The test had worked, but the cost was devastating. Danny Clark had just proven that humans could hurt the Devourers, but only by dying in the process. "Send the signal to all human colonies," he ordered. "Tell them what we've learned. Tell them we have a weapon, but using it requires the ultimate sacrifice." The response from human settlements across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, millions of volunteers had registered for the mission. Entire families volunteered together. Military units volunteered as complete formations. Even children too young to understand death volunteered alongside their parents. Colonel Ryan Brooks coordinated the military aspects of the plan. "We'll need to time the attacks carefully. If we hit them all at once, we might overload their collective consciousness." Dr. Carter had been studying the data from Danny's sacrifice. "I'm seeing something interesting in the readings. When he died, his consciousness didn't just disappear. It became part of the Devourer's collective mind, but it kept fighting from the inside." "What does that mean?" asked Helen Price. "It means that every human they consume becomes a permanent infection in their system. The more humans they eat, the sicker they become." The idea gave Jake hope, but it also made the plan more horrifying. They weren't just asking people to die for the cause. They were asking them to continue fighting after death, trapped forever inside the collective consciousness of their enemies. Admiral Susan Hayes arrived from the outer colonies with a fleet of volunteer ships. Each vessel was crewed by humans who had said goodbye to their families and accepted that they would never return home. "We have over 500 ships ready for the first wave," she reported. "Another 1,000 are being prepared for follow-up attacks." The alien representatives watched these preparations with a mixture of admiration and horror. No species in galactic history had ever planned its own extinction as a military strategy. "Your people are incredibly brave," said Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom. "But surely there must be another way." Jake looked at the tactical displays, showing devourer fleets advancing on populated worlds. "If there is another way, we haven't found it, and we're running out of time." The first major attack came at a mining colony called New Denver. The human colonists had refused evacuation, choosing instead to stay and fight. When the devourers arrived, they found 50,000 humans waiting for them. The consumption took 30 minutes instead of the usual 10. During that time, the affected devourer vessels showed signs of severe disruption. Several actually began attacking each other as conflicting consciousness fought for control. "The effect is cumulative," Lisa reported as she analyzed the data. "Each human consumed makes the disruption worse. At this rate, a few million human sacrifices might cause complete system failure." Ben had been working on modifications to human ships and settlements. "I've been installing quantum resonance amplifiers in all our facilities. They should boost the life force signature of humans during the consumption process, making us even more toxic to the devourers." The plan was taking shape, but Jake could see the psychological toll it was taking on everyone involved. Humans were volunteering to die by the millions, and the weight of commanding such sacrifices was crushing. During a quiet moment, Dr. Carter approached him with disturbing news. "Jake, I've been monitoring your brain patterns since we started this operation. The psychic feedback from the consumed humans is affecting all of us." "What do you mean?" "Every time humans are consumed by the devourers, we can feel their final moments, their rage, their defiance, their pain. It's creating a kind of collective trauma among the survivors." Jake had noticed the effect himself. He was having dreams filled with the voices of the dead, all of them screaming defiance at their cosmic enemies. But he also felt their strength, their refusal to surrender even in death. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," he said quietly. "Maybe we need to carry their anger with us." The next phase of the plan involved larger targets. Entire human colonies would volunteer for consumption, timing their deaths to cause maximum disruption to the devourer fleet. The mathematics were cold and brutal, but they offered the first real hope of victory. Lieutenant Kate Murphy had been analyzing devourer movement patterns. "They're adapting to our strategy. The main fleet is trying to avoid human settlements now. Then we bring the fight to them," Jake decided. "Admiral Hayes, prepare all volunteer fleets for a direct assault on their command vessels." The final preparation took 3 days. Hundreds of ships filled with human volunteers prepared to fly directly into the heart of the devourer fleet. Each crew knew they were going to die, but they also knew their deaths would strike a blow against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for eons. As Jake prepared to lead the assault himself, he received a message from Earth. It was from his sister, Sarah, who had stayed behind to help coordinate the global volunteer effort. "I know you'll probably never get this message, Jake, but I wanted you to know that Mom and Dad would be proud. You found a way to turn our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. Humans have always been too stubborn to know when to quit. Now that stubbornness might save the galaxy." The message ended with news that made Jake's blood run cold. Earth itself had volunteered as the final weapon. If all else failed, the entire human homeworld would sacrifice itself in one massive consumption event, hoping to deliver a killing blow to the devourer collective consciousness. 8 billion people, ready to die as one to save species they had never met. Jake looked out at his fleet of volunteer ships, each one carrying crews who would never see home again. Behind them, Concordia Prime waited with all the alien species who had once considered humans too dangerous for civilized society. Now, those same aliens were praying that human savagery would be enough to save them all. The final battle began at the edge of the galaxy, where the largest devourer entity had emerged from the cosmic void. It was massive beyond comprehension, easily the size of Earth's moon, and it pulsed with a hunger that had consumed entire civilizations across multiple galaxies. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the volunteer flagship Defiance, watching the monster approach. Behind him flew 500 human vessels, each crewed by people who had said their final goodbyes. They were flying directly into the creature's feeding range, knowing they would never leave it alive. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison," Jake spoke into his communication system. "Remember, we're not just dying today. We're poisoning the thing that wants to devour everything we love. Make your deaths count." The responses came back from hundreds of crews, voices filled with determination instead of fear, pilots who would never see their children grow up, engineers who would never finish their projects, scientists who would never make their discoveries, all united in one final act of defiance. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the readings from her position on Concordia Prime, watching as the human fleet approached the ancient entity. "Jake, the creature is unlike anything we've seen before. It's not just a devourer, it's their original form, the one that spawned all the others." The massive entity reached out with tendrils of shadow that stretched across space itself. As the first human ships were enveloped, the creature began the consumption process that had destroyed thousands of species throughout cosmic history. But something was wrong. The entity's feeding rhythm, which had remained constant for eons, began to fluctuate as it encountered human consciousness. Admiral Susan Hayes led her squadron directly into the creature's core, where the feeding was most intense. As her life force was drained away, she focused all her rage and defiance into a single thought: "You will not win." The effect was immediate and violent. The entity's purple glow flickered as conflicting thoughts invaded its collective mind. For the first time in its existence, it experienced doubt, fear, and the burning human emotion of righteous anger. On the station, Lisa watched the readings with amazement and horror. The entity is destabilizing. The human consciousness is creating chaos in its collective mind. More ships flew into the creature's embrace. Captain Ryan Brooks led a formation of military vessels directly into what appeared to be the entity's brain center. As they were consumed, their combined defiance created a psychic storm that tore through the creature's thoughts. Jake piloted his ship toward the very heart of the monster, where the concentration of consumed souls was greatest. Through his ship's sensors, he could hear them, the voices of billions of beings that had been devoured over the millennia, all trapped within the creature's consciousness. But now he could hear something else. The voices of humans who had been consumed were still fighting, still refusing to surrender. Danny Clark's voice echoed through the psychic noise, followed by Admiral Hayes, Captain Brooks, and thousands of others. They had become a virus in the entity's mind, spreading their defiance to the other trapped souls. "Jake," Lisa's voice crackled through the communication system, "I'm detecting something impossible. The entity isn't just being disrupted by human consciousness, it's being rewritten by it." As Jake's ship was finally enveloped by the creature's feeding tendrils, he felt his life force being drained away. But instead of despair, he felt a fierce joy. He could sense the human souls that had gone before him, and they were winning the battle for the entity's consciousness. The ancient creature that had devoured civilizations across multiple galaxies began to scream. It was a sound that resonated through dimensions, expressing an agony it had never imagined possible. For eons, it had fed on fear and surrender. Now it was choking on rage and defiance. From Concordia Prime, the alien representatives watched in awe as the massive entity began to tear itself apart. The human consciousness trapped within its collective mind had become a cancer, spreading their refusal to submit to every corner of its being. "Impossible," whispered Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom. "The entity is dying. After millions of years of existence, it's actually dying." Ben Taylor, monitoring from the station's engineering section, made a startling discovery. The entity isn't just dying, it's changing. The human consciousness is taking control of its structure. The massive creature's death throes created shockwaves that rippled across space itself. Lesser devourer entities throughout the galaxy suddenly stopped their feeding, and began convulsing as the psychic disruption spread through their shared consciousness. Dr. Carter realized what was happening. They're all connected. The entity was the source consciousness for all devourers. When it dies, the entire species dies with it. Across the galaxy, devourer fleets that had terrorized civilizations for eons suddenly went silent. Their purple glow faded to nothing, and their shadow forms began to dissolve back into the cosmic void. But something else was happening. As the original entity died, it released the consciousness of every being it had ever consumed. Trillions of souls, trapped for millennia, suddenly found themselves free. Among them were the voices of ancient humans, members of Earth species who had been consumed during humanity's ice age. They had been trapped in the creature's mind for 50,000 years, but they had never stopped fighting. The revelation hit the watching aliens like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just defeated the devourers. They had revealed that humans and devourers had encountered each other before, in Earth's distant past. The trauma of that ancient meeting had been encoded in human DNA, making them naturally resistant to the creature's feeding process. As the entity's death completed, a final psychic pulse spread across the galaxy. Every remaining human felt it, the voices of their sacrificed comrades, no longer trapped but triumphant. They had not just died to save the galaxy. They had conquered death itself. Prime Speaker Resonance of Ancient Wisdom stood in the council chamber, staring at the empty space where the greatest threat in galactic history had once existed. Around him, representatives from 12 species tried to comprehend what they had witnessed. The humans didn't just destroy our enemy, he said quietly. They transformed it. They turned a force of pure consumption into an act of liberation. The surviving human ships began returning to Concordia Prime, but they carried scars that would never heal. The psychic feedback from their sacrificed comrades had marked every survivor. They had felt the final moments of millions of their own kind, and those experiences had changed them forever. Jake Morrison's sacrifice had been the catalyst, but he lived on in a way no one expected. His consciousness, along with those of all the consumed humans, had become part of the galaxy's psychic background. They were the guardians now, standing watch against any threat that might emerge from the cosmic void. The Galactic Council faced a new reality. Humanity had proven themselves not just worthy of membership, but essential for the galaxy's survival. But the other species now understood what humans truly were, not just another intelligent race, but apex predators of consciousness itself. In the weeks that followed, human colonies spread across the galaxy at an unprecedented rate. Other species welcomed them not as equals, but as protectors. The same aggression and stubbornness that had once made aliens fear humans was now their greatest comfort. Dr. Lisa Carter, now serving as humanity's chief representative to the Council, addressed the assembled species for the first time as an equal member. "We didn't ask to be your guardians," she said simply, "but we accept the responsibility. Humanity will stand watch against the darkness between stars because that's what we do. We protect what we love, no matter the cost." The alien representatives nodded in acceptance. They had learned that some threats required monsters to fight them. Fortunately, they had found the right monsters for the job. In the depths of space, where the great entity had died, something new was growing. The combined consciousness of sacrificed humans had taken root in the fabric of space itself, creating a kind of immune system for the galaxy. Any threat that tried to consume civilized life would face the eternal defiance of humanity's greatest heroes. They had become the apex predators of the stars, not through conquest but through the ultimate sacrifice. And they would stand guard forever, ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The galaxy was safe, protected by the ghosts of humans who had refused to go quietly into the dark.